Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the message arrived on his ship. The UES Defiance had been floating in space near the outer edge of human territory for 3 weeks now, mapping new star systems and looking for planets that might be good for human colonies. It was quiet work, the kind Jake enjoyed after years of fighting space pirates and dealing with alien traders who tried to cheat humans out of their goods. The bridge was calm that morning, with only the soft hum of the ship's engines and the quiet beeping of scanning equipment. Lisa Parker was working at her engineering station, making sure all the ship's systems were running smoothly. Ben Clark sat at his medical station reading reports from their last stop at a human colony where they had delivered medicine. Amy Torres was at the navigation controls, plotting their course to the next unexplored system. Then the communication system came alive with a sound Jake had never heard before. It was like music, but wrong somehow, like someone had taken a beautiful song and twisted it into something that made his skin crawl. The main screen flickered and showed symbols that hurt to look at, symbols that seemed to move and change even when Jake tried to focus on them. A voice spoke in perfect human English, but with an accent that sounded like breaking glass mixed with the sound of metal scraping against stone. Human vessel. You are commanded to hear the words of the Galactic Council. Your species has been found guilty of crimes against the peace of the galaxy. You will come to Nexus Prime immediately to face judgment for your actions. The image that appeared on the screen made Jake's blood run cold. It was tall, maybe 8 feet high, and made of what looked like living crystal that pulsed with its own light. Its face had no features that Jake could recognize as eyes or mouth, but somehow he knew it was looking directly at him. This was Ambassador Zethkar of the Veltar, a race that had ruled the Galactic Council for over 100 years. The crimes of humanity are many, the crystal being continued. You have expanded beyond the boundaries set for new species. You have refused to accept the guidance of older and wiser races. You have built weapons without permission from the Council. Most serious of all, you have filled the minds of peaceful species with dangerous ideas about freedom and self-rule. These crimes cannot go unpunished. Jake felt his crew gathering behind him. Lisa had stopped her work and was staring at the screen with wide eyes. Ben had put down his medical reports and looked pale. Amy had turned away from her navigation controls and was gripping the edge of her station so hard her knuckles were white. If you do not come to Nexus Prime within 10 standard days, Ambassador Zethkar said, the full power of the Galactic Council will be brought against your homeworld and all human colonies. We have destroyed entire civilizations for less than what your species has done. Do not test our patience. The message ended, and the screen went back to showing the stars outside. Jake stared at the empty screen for a long moment, feeling the weight of what had just happened settling on his shoulders. In all the years humans had been traveling among the stars, they had heard rumors about the Galactic Council, whispers about an organization so powerful that entire races bowed before it without question. Captain, Lisa said quietly, we could run. The jump engines are ready and we could be back to Earth in a few days. We could warn everyone what's coming. Jake thought about that. They could run back to Earth and tell the government what had happened. The human military could prepare for war, maybe even evacuate some of the colonies. But Jake knew it wouldn't matter. The Galactic Council ruled over 1,000 different alien species, each one with their own ships and weapons. Humanity had maybe 50 worlds and a few hundred ships. It would be like a mouse trying to fight a lion. We could also try to hide, Amy suggested. There are unexplored systems out here where no one would find us. We could start over somewhere else. Ben shook his head. But what about Earth? What about all the human colonies with billions of people? We can't just abandon them. Jake stood up from his captain's chair and walked to the main screen, staring out at the stars. Somewhere out there was Nexus Prime, the capital world of the Galactic Council, where alien judges waited to decide the fate of humanity. He thought about his home on Earth. about the small town where he grew up and the people who had raised him to believe that freedom was worth fighting for. He thought about all the human colonies where families were living their lives, having no idea that their entire future hung in the balance. "Set course for Nexus Prime," Jake said finally. "Sir?" Lisa asked. "If they want to judge humanity," Jake said, turning to face his crew, "then humanity will answer their call." The journey to Nexus Prime took 8 days through jump space, and Jake spent most of that time trying to prepare for what they would face. He read every report humanity had about the Galactic Council, which wasn't much. Most of it came from alien traders who spoke in whispers about the great power that ruled the galaxy from their artificial world. When they finally arrived at Nexus Prime, Jake understood why so many species feared the Council. The world was not natural, but built by countless alien races working together over thousands of years. Massive towers reached up toward space, each one belonging to a different member species of the Council. The towers were all different shapes and sizes, some looking like twisted metal, others like grown coral, and some that seemed to be made of pure energy. Jake could see hundreds of ships in orbit around the planet, each one representing a different alien race. Some were huge, bigger than entire human cities, while others were small and sleek. There were ships that looked like living creatures, and others that seemed to be made of the same crystal material as Ambassador Zethkar. All of them had weapons pointed toward the UES Defiance. "Captain," Amy said from her navigation station, "we're getting docking instructions. They want us to land at a specific platform." "Do it," Jake said, even though every instinct told him this was a trap. The landing platform was enormous, easily big enough to hold a dozen ships the size of the Defiance. As they touched down, Jake could see alien guards waiting for them. The guards came from different species, but all wore the same dark uniforms with the Council symbol on their chests. Some walked on 2 legs like humans, others floated in the air, and a few looked like walking machines. "Sir," Lisa said, checking her instruments, "they're putting some kind of energy field around our ship. We won't be able to take off without their permission." Jake nodded. He had expected that. "You 3 stay with the ship. If something happens to me, try to get word back to Earth about what we learned here." "Captain, we should come with you," Ben said. "No. If this goes badly, humanity will need witnesses to tell the story." Jake left his ship and was immediately surrounded by the alien guards. They did not speak to him, but simply formed a circle around him and began walking toward the largest tower on the planet. The tower seemed to stretch up forever, disappearing into the clouds above. The inside of the tower was even more impressive than the outside. The walls were covered with images and writings from 1,000 different worlds. Jake saw pictures of alien cities, strange creatures, and battles that had happened long before humans had even learned to make fire. Everything was designed to make visitors feel small and unimportant. They took him to a massive room that could have held a small city. It was shaped like a bowl with seats rising up on all sides, and every seat was filled with a different kind of alien. Jake had never seen so many strange creatures in one place. There were beings made of light, others that looked like walking plants, some that seemed to be made of living metal, and many that were so alien Jake could not even guess what they were. At the center of the room was a platform where Jake was told to stand. Above him, on the highest seat, sat a creature that looked like a cross between an octopus and a machine. Its many arms moved constantly, touching controls and screens that floated in the air around it. This was High Chancellor Morden, the leader of the Galactic Council. "Human," the Chancellor said in a voice that sounded like grinding metal, "you stand accused of crimes against the peace and order of the galaxy. Listen now to the charges against your species." The Chancellor's mechanical voice echoed through the chamber as he read from a list that seemed to go on forever. "First, your species has expanded beyond the boundaries set for new civilizations. Second, you have refused to accept the cultural guidance offered by older and wiser races. Third, you have developed weapons and technology without seeking permission from this council. Fourth, you have made contact with other species without following proper protocols. Jake listened to each charge and felt his anger growing. Every single thing they called a crime was something that made humans strong and free. They were being punished for exploring, for thinking for themselves, for defending their homes, and for making friends with other species. But most serious of all, the Chancellor continued, your species has spread dangerous ideas among the peaceful races of the galaxy. You have taught them to question authority, to seek independence, to believe they can govern themselves without the wisdom of the Council. This corruption of innocent minds cannot be allowed to continue. Jake looked around the chamber and began to see things he had missed before. Many of the alien representatives sat perfectly still, never moving or speaking unless the Chancellor addressed them directly. Others seemed afraid, glancing nervously at the guards posted around the room. Only a few, sitting in the far corners of the chamber, showed any sign of independent thought. The Chancellor's many arms gestured toward Jake. How do you answer these charges, human? Will your species submit to the judgment of this council and accept whatever punishment we decide is appropriate? Jake had been thinking about this moment for 8 days. He knew that whatever he said next would determine not just his own fate, but the fate of every human in the galaxy. He thought about his crew waiting back at the ship, trusting him to do the right thing. He thought about Earth and all the human colonies where people were living their lives in freedom. I reject your authority to judge my species, Jake said, his voice carrying clearly through the huge chamber. We never agreed to your laws, never signed your treaties, and never asked to join your council of tyrants. The silence that followed was complete. In the thousands of years since the Galactic Council had been formed, no one had ever challenged their authority so directly. Every alien in the chamber stared at Jake as if he had grown a second head. The silence in the great chamber stretched on for what felt like forever. Jake could hear his own heartbeat echoing in his ears as thousands of alien eyes stared at him. Some of the creatures in the higher seats were making strange noises, chittering, and buzzing in languages Jake could not understand. Others sat frozen like statues, as if they could not believe what they had just heard. High Chancellor Mordun was the first to recover from the shock. His mechanical arms moved faster now, touching controls that made the lights in the chamber grow brighter and cast harsh shadows across the alien faces. You dare to question the authority of the Galactic Council? We who have brought peace to 1,000 worlds, who have ended wars and created prosperity across the galaxy. Ambassador Zethkar rose from his seat, his crystal body pulsing with angry light. This human shows the exact corruption we have warned about. His species believes they are above the laws that govern all civilized beings. They think they're primitive. Ideas of freedom are more important than the stability we have built over 10,000 years. Jake looked around the chamber again, seeing the alien representatives with new eyes. He noticed how many of them kept their heads down, never looking directly at the council leaders. He saw the guards positioned throughout the room, weapons ready to stop any sign of rebellion. He understood now that this was not a place of justice, but a place of control. You call it peace, Jake said, his voice growing stronger. But I call it surrender. You've created a galaxy full of slaves who have forgotten they were ever free. You've taken away their right to choose, their right to grow, their right to make their own mistakes and learn from them. Order must be maintained, Chancellor Mordun replied, his mechanical voice booming through the chamber. Without our guidance, species war against each other. Chaos spreads, millions die in pointless conflicts. We have prevented more suffering than you can possibly imagine. Maybe, Jake said, but you've also prevented growth. You've stopped progress. You've made sure that no one can ever become more than what you allow them to be. That's not peace. That's just slow death. Several alien representatives in the far corners of the chamber were whispering among themselves now. Jake could see some of them nodding slightly, as if his words were awakening thoughts they had tried to forget. The guards noticed too, and began, moving closer to those sections. Ambassador Zethkar's crystal form blazed brighter. "Your species will submit to council justice, human. We offer you one final chance. Accept our terms. Allow us to place governors on your worlds to guide your development, and humanity will be permitted to continue existing under our protection." Jake thought about what that would mean. Human children would grow up under alien rule, learning to bow their heads and never question authority. Human explorers would stop looking for new worlds because aliens would decide where they were allowed to go. Human scientists would stop inventing because aliens would control what they were allowed to discover. "And if we refuse?" Jake asked. "Then, humanity will be declared a threat to galactic stability," the Chancellor answered. "Your worlds will be surrounded by our fleets. Your people will be relocated to colonies where they can be properly supervised until they learn to behave like civilized beings." Jake felt the weight of his entire species resting on his shoulders. Whatever he decided in the next few moments would determine whether humans remained free or became just another conquered race in the Council's collection. He thought about Earth, about the billions of people who had never asked for this fight but would have to live with the consequences. Then, he remembered something from his studies of galactic law, something so old and forgotten that most species had never heard of it. It was a law that had been written into the very foundation of galactic civilization, back when the Council was first formed, and some races still remembered what it meant to be free. "I invoke the right of single combat," Jake announced. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Aliens throughout the chamber began making loud noises, some jumping from their seats, others huddling together in fear. Several of the guards raised their weapons, unsure of what was happening. Even Chancellor Morden seemed shocked, his many arms freezing in mid-motion. Ambassador Zethkar was the first to understand what Jake had done. "The right of single combat has not been invoked in 8,000 years, human. Do you even understand what you are asking for?" Jake had studied the ancient law during his journey to Nexus Prime. It was a relic from the early days of galactic civilization, when the Council still pretended to respect the rights of individual species. Any race that believed the Council had overstepped its authority could challenge that authority through individual combat. If the challenger won, their species would be judged by their own merits rather than Council law. If they lost, they would accept whatever punishment the Council decided. "I understand perfectly," Jake said. "If I win, humanity is free to choose its own path. If I lose, we'll accept whatever fate you decide for us." The Chancellor's mechanical voice was quieter now, almost thoughtful. "The law is clear. If you truly invoke the right of single combat, we must honor it. But you should know that our champions are chosen from the finest warriors of 1,000 worlds. They have training and abilities far beyond what any human possesses." "I know the odds," Jake replied. "But this isn't about winning or losing. It's about showing the galaxy that someone is still willing to fight for freedom, even when the fight seems impossible." Around the chamber, Jake could see alien representatives talking to each other in excited whispers. Many of them looked confused, as if they were hearing words they had forgotten existed. Others seemed frightened, glancing nervously at the Council, leaders, and the guards. But in the far corners, among the representatives who had been marginalized and ignored, Jake saw something that gave him hope. He saw beings sitting up straighter, looking at him with something that might have been admiration or respect. He saw the first signs that the galaxy had not completely forgotten what freedom looked like. The right of single combat had been invoked, and for the first time in thousands of years, the absolute authority of the Galactic Council was being challenged. The council chambers emptied slowly after Jake invoked the right of single combat. The alien representatives filed out in small groups, whispering among themselves in languages that sounded like music, grinding metal, or electronic beeping. Jake, could feel their eyes on him as they passed, some looking at him with curiosity, others with what might have been pity. Jake was escorted to quarters on a council station that orbited Nexus Prime. The rooms were comfortable but clearly designed for prisoners. The walls were made of some kind of energy field that looked solid but hummed with power. There were no windows, but screens on the walls showed peaceful scenes from various alien worlds. His crew was allowed to visit him during the 3 days. It took the council to choose their champion. Lisa, Ben, and Amy came every day, bringing him food from their ship and news about what was happening on the station. "Captain," Lisa said during their first visit, "the aliens are going crazy about what you did. We've been monitoring their communications and they're talking in dozens of different languages about something called the rite of combat. Most of them seem to have never heard of it before." Ben nodded, looking worried. "I've been studying the medical data we have on different alien species. Sir, some of these races are designed for fighting in ways humans just can't match. Their bones are stronger, their muscles are more powerful, their reflexes are faster. Whatever they choose to fight you is going to be built for killing. It's not about physical strength," Jake told them. "It's about showing the galaxy that freedom is worth fighting for, no matter what the odds are." Amy had been working on analyzing council records during their visits. "Captain, I found some information about past uses of the rite of combat. The last time it was invoked was 8,000 years ago by a species called the Nethari. They lost, and their entire race was relocated to prison colonies. They're still there as far as I can tell. But there were winners too," Jake pointed out. "Species that fought and earned their independence from council rule. Not many, but some." On the second day, Ben brought disturbing news. "I've been studying the likely candidates for their champion. If they choose based on pure combat ability, it'll probably be someone from the Ketmori warrior caste. They're genetically engineered for fighting, Captain. They're twice as strong as humans, with natural armor plating and enhanced reflexes. They've been bred for war for thousands of generations." Lisa added her own research. "Or they might pick a Veltar crystal warrior like that ambassador we saw. They can generate energy shields around their bodies and fire plasma bolts from their hands. They're basically living weapons." Jake listened to all of this information, but tried not to let it discourage him. He spent his time in the cell exercising, keeping his body in the best condition possible and thinking about strategy. He had always been good at finding weaknesses in opponents who seemed stronger than him. On the third day, High Chancellor Mordun himself came to visit Jake's cell. The mechanical being had to bend his multiple arms to fit through the doorway, and his presence filled the small room with the smell of oil and ozone. "Human," the Chancellor said, "I have come to offer you one final chance to withdraw your challenge. The champion we have chosen has never been defeated in combat. He has served as our enforcer for over 2 centuries, ending rebellions across 50 worlds. If you fight him, you will die, and your species will still face our judgment." "Who did?" "You choose?" Jake asked. "Warlord Grixtal of the Ketmori Dominion. He stands 8 feet tall and weighs as much as 3 humans. His exoskeleton can deflect energy weapons and his claws can cut through steel. He has killed over 1,000 beings in single combat." Jake felt a chill run down his spine, but tried not to show it. "Sounds like he's had a lot of practice. Maybe he's gotten overconfident." The Chancellor's mechanical arms moved in what might have been the equivalent of a shrug. "Perhaps. Or perhaps he has simply never faced an opponent foolish enough to challenge the might of the Galactic Council. The choice remains yours, human. Withdraw your challenge and accept our mercy, or face certain death in the arena." "I've made my choice," Jake said. "The combat will proceed as planned." The Chancellor studied Jake for a long moment with sensors that glowed like red eyes. "You are either very brave or very stupid, human. I confess I am not certain which." After the Chancellor left, Jake's crew visited him one final time. They brought him his weapons and armor from the ship, though Jake knew they would be almost useless against the kind of opponent he would face. "Captain," Amy said, tears in her eyes, "you don't have to do this. We could find another way. There is no other way, Jake replied gently. This is the only chance humanity has to remain free. If I don't fight, the Council will destroy everything we've built and turn us into just another conquered species. Lisa was angry rather than sad. It's not fair. You're just one man against an entire galaxy of aliens who have thousands of years of experience. Maybe, Jake said, but I'm not fighting for myself. I'm fighting for every human child who deserves to grow up free. I'm fighting for every explorer who wants to see what's beyond the next star. I'm fighting for the right of humans to choose their own destiny. Ben checked Jake's medical readings one last time. Your vitals are good, Captain. You're in the best physical condition possible, but against a Ketmori warrior, that might not be enough. It'll have to be, Jake said. On the morning of the combat, Jake was escorted to the arena by a group of council guards. The arena was a massive circular chamber with energy barriers that could create any kind of environment the council desired. Thousands of alien representatives filled the viewing areas, while billions more across the galaxy watched through quantum communication feeds. Jake walked to the center of the arena carrying his simple human weapons, a plasma pistol, a combat knife, and lightweight armor that would provide some protection but wouldn't slow him down. Around the viewing areas, he could see aliens of every description watching him with intense interest. Then the far door of the arena opened, and Warlord Grixtal entered. The Ketmori warrior was everything the Chancellor had promised, and worse. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, his natural exoskeleton gleaming like black metal in the arena lights. His forearms ended in claws that looked sharp enough to cut through diamond, and his multifaceted eyes tracked Jake's every movement with predatory precision. So, Grixtal said, his voice rumbling like an earthquake, you are the human who thinks he can challenge the might of the Galactic Council. I have ended rebellions on 50 worlds, little human. You are simply one more fool who chose defiance over survival. The arena's environmental controls activated with a low humming sound, and the floor began to change. Rocky outcroppings rose from the ground, dense vegetation sprouted in patches around the chamber, and the ruins of ancient alien technology appeared scattered throughout the space. The Council had created a complex battlefield that would test adaptability as much as pure fighting skill. Jake studied the terrain quickly, already planning how he could use each feature to his advantage. The rocks would provide cover from Grixtal's charges. The vegetation might slow down the larger warrior, and the technology ruins could offer hiding places or perhaps even weapons if he was lucky. Grixtal seemed unimpressed by the environmental changes. He flexed his forearms, each one ending in claws that gleamed like surgical steel. His exoskeleton was covered with battle scars that told the story of hundreds of previous fights. This was a being who had been designed for war from birth and had spent centuries perfecting the art of killing. Are you ready to die for your foolish ideals, human? Grixtal asked, his voice carrying easily across the arena. I'm ready to show this galaxy what one human can do when everything he cares about is on the line, Jake replied, drawing his plasma pistol. The combat began without ceremony. Grixtal moved with terrifying speed for such a large creature covering the distance between them in 3 powerful strides. His 4 arms attacked from different angles simultaneously, forcing Jake to dive and roll to avoid being cut in half by the razor-sharp claws. Jake came up firing, his plasma bolts striking Grixtal's exoskeleton and dissipating harmlessly. The energy weapons that could kill most beings simply spread across the warrior's natural armor like water hitting stone. Is that the best humanity can offer? Grixtal laughed, a sound like grinding metal. I have faced children with more dangerous weapons. But Jake wasn't trying to kill his opponent with the first few shots. He was testing the armor, looking for weaknesses, studying how Grixtal moved and fought. The human rolled behind a rocky outcropping as the warrior's claws carved deep gouges in the stone where he had been standing moments before. The battle quickly became a deadly game of cat and mouse. Grixtal had overwhelming strength and speed, but Jake had something the warrior wasn't prepared for: unpredictability. Humans had evolved as persistence hunters, creatures who succeeded not through overwhelming force, but through endurance, intelligence, and the ability to adapt to changing circumstances. Jake used every advantage the terrain offered. He climbed through the artificial vegetation, forcing Grixtal to follow him through spaces that slowed down the larger warrior. He used the technology ruins for cover, firing quick bursts before moving to a new position. He constantly stayed on the move, never letting Grixtal pin him down in one place. "Stand still and fight like a warrior." Grixtal roared in frustration as Jake disappeared behind another rocky barrier. "I am fighting like a warrior," Jake called back. "A human warrior." The battle continued for nearly an hour, with Jake slowly wearing down his opponent's patience, if not his strength. Grixtal was incredibly powerful, but he was used to opponents who would stand and face him directly. He had never fought anyone who refused to play by the traditional rules of combat. Jake continued to study his opponent, looking for any weakness he could exploit. The exoskeleton seemed impenetrable to his energy weapons, but he noticed that there were small gaps at the joints where the armor plates connected. The gaps were tiny and constantly moving as Grixtal fought, but they were there. More importantly, Jake began to notice patterns in how the warrior moved. Grixtal favored his right side when attacking, probably due to some old injury. His attacks followed predictable sequences that Jake began to anticipate. Most importantly, the warrior was starting to show signs of frustration, making his movements less controlled and more aggressive. The turning point came when Grixtal, enraged by his inability to corner his prey, overextended himself during a particularly vicious attack. All four of his arms committed to a strike that should have cut Jake in half, but the human dropped to the ground at the last second and rolled between the warrior's legs. For just a moment, Grixtal was off balance. His left rear joint plate shifted slightly during the aggressive maneuver. Jake saw the opening he had been waiting for and took it without hesitation. With precision born of desperation and determination, he placed a single plasma bolt exactly where it needed to go. The energy beam penetrated the tiny gap in the armor and severed a crucial nerve cluster. Grixtal's left side went limp, his perfect balance destroyed. The warrior stumbled, his confident movements suddenly clumsy and uncontrolled. "Impossible," Grixtal gasped, staring at his useless left arm in shock. "No one has ever wounded me in single combat." "There's a first time for everything," Jake said, but he knew the fight was far from over. What followed was not pretty or honorable. Jake had no illusions about fair play or warrior's honor. This was about survival, not just for himself, but for his entire species. He used every dirty trick he had learned in years of fighting space pirates and dealing with hostile aliens. He attacked when Grixtal tried to adjust to his injury, kept moving when the warrior attempted to compensate with his remaining arms, and never gave his opponent a chance to recover. The end came when Jake managed to get behind the wounded warrior and drive his combat knife into another gap in the armor, this one at the base of Grixtal's neck. The blade found the nerve center that controlled the warrior's remaining motor functions. Grixtal collapsed to the arena floor, paralyzed but still alive. He stared up at Jake with what might have been respect in his multifaceted eyes. "You fight without honor," the warrior said weakly. "I fight to win," Jake replied. "That's what humans do when everything we care about is at stake." Jake stood over his defeated opponent, bleeding from a dozen wounds but victorious. The silence in the arena was complete, broken only by the sound of his own heavy breathing echoing through the vast chamber. The silence in the arena stretched on for what felt like forever. Jake could hear his own heartbeat echoing in his ears as thousands of alien eyes stared down at him from the viewing areas. Some of the creatures were making soft sounds, chittering or humming in languages he couldn't understand. Others sat frozen like statues, as if they couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. High Chancellor Mordun's mechanical voice finally broke the silence, but it carried none of its usual authority. The combat is concluded. By the ancient laws that govern this council, humanity has earned the right to govern itself free from our interference. But Jake wasn't finished. Standing in the center of the arena, with Grixtal's paralyzed form at his feet, bleeding from his wounds but unbowed, he looked up at the thousands of alien representatives watching from above. "I didn't fight just for humanity," Jake said, his voice carrying clearly through the arena's sound system. "I fought for every species in these viewing areas that has forgotten what it means to choose their own path. I fought for the races sitting in the back rows whose voices are never heard in your debates. I fought for every world that has traded freedom for the promise of safety." He turned slowly, making eye contact with as many of the alien representatives as he could. Many of them looked away, but others met his gaze with something that might have been hope. "You call us dangerous because we expand beyond boundaries you set, without asking our permission," Jake continued. "You call us corrupting because we teach others that they don't have to accept whatever fate you decide for them. You call us criminals because we refuse to bow down to authority that exists only because you say it does." Ambassador Zethkar rose from his seat, his crystal form pulsing with agitation. "Order must be maintained, human. Without the Council's guidance, species war among themselves. We have prevented countless conflicts through our rule." "You've prevented growth," Jake shot back. "You've stopped progress. You've made sure that entire civilizations never become more than what you allow them to be. You call it peace, but it's really just fear. Fear of change, fear of losing control, fear of letting others choose their own mistakes to make." Murmurs began rippling through the viewing areas. For the first time in thousands of years, alien representatives were talking to each other instead of simply waiting for orders from the council leadership. Jake could see beings in the far corners sitting up straighter, whispering among themselves, looking at him with expressions he couldn't read, but that seemed less fearful than before. "The human speaks of concepts that lead to chaos," Chancellor Morden said, his mechanical arms moving nervously. "Freedom without guidance results in war and suffering." "Maybe," Jake admitted, "freedom is dangerous. It means people can make bad choices, can fail, can hurt themselves and others. But it also means they can grow, can learn, can become something better than what they were. You've created a galaxy where no one is allowed to fail, but that also means no one is allowed to truly succeed." He gestured toward the viewing areas where the alien representatives sat. "Look around you. Really look. How many of these species have made any real progress in the last 1,000 years? How many have discovered new technologies, created new art, or found new ways to live? You've given them safety, but you've also given them stagnation." The debates that followed lasted for days. The arena was cleared, but the council chambers filled with voices that had been silent for millennia. Ancient alliances were questioned, long-forgotten grievances were aired, and the monolithic unity of the council began to crack like ice breaking up in spring. Some species demanded immediate independence, claiming they had been forced into council, membership against their will. Others clung desperately to the security they had known for thousands of years, terrified of what might happen if they had to make their own decisions. Still others took middle positions, wanting some freedom but not complete independence from council guidance. Jake found himself at the center of it all, called upon to explain human concepts of democracy, individual rights, and self-determination to beings who had never considered such ideas. He spoke to groups of alien representatives, some eager to learn, others hostile to everything he represented. "We're not saying our way is the only way," Jake explained to one gathering. "We're saying that every species should have the right to find their own way, even if that means making mistakes. The council can still exist, can still offer guidance and help prevent wars, but it shouldn't force that help on anyone who doesn't want it." The final vote took place in the Great Chamber where Jake had first been brought to face judgment. But this time, instead of a single voice of authority, hundreds of different species were represented. The debate was chaotic, sometimes angry, but it was real debate rather than simple obedience to council commands. In the end, the Galactic Council didn't collapse, but it transformed. A new charter was written, one that recognized the right of species to choose their own level of council involvement. Some worlds chose to remain under full council protection, content with the security that provided. Others declared complete independence, ready to face the risks that came with freedom. Most chose something in between, membership in a new kind of council that offered guidance and cooperation, but didn't demand submission. Trade agreements replaced territorial controls, mutual defense pacts replaced enforced peace, and voluntary cooperation replaced mandatory compliance. Humanity was granted full independence and recognition as a neutral territory where other species could come to study alternative forms of government. The UES Defiance became the flagship of humanity's new diplomatic corps, carrying not weapons of war, but ideas of liberty to any species curious enough to listen. Jake Morrison returned to Earth as a hero, but more importantly, he returned to a galaxy where freedom was once again possible. The transformation wasn't complete and wouldn't happen overnight, but for the first time in 10,000 years, beings across the galaxy could look up at the stars and remember that sometimes one individual's refusal to surrender could change everything. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly what Jake had been fighting for.